Good afternoon. This is Patty Cruna. Welcome to the Affordable Housing Plan webinar, and I'd like to first thank you all for attending today. We have over 100 people registered for today's webinar. I'm going to be helping facilitate today's session. I'll now turn the presentation over to our presenters, Commissioner Mary Tingerthal, and our Director of Planning, Research, and Evaluation, John Patterson.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Commissioner Mary Tingerthal, and I want to thank you for joining us for this afternoon's 2016 Affordable Housing Plan Overview webinar. Just to remind you, we are now in the public comment period through the end of August, and we will be accepting your comments and taking those into consideration, perhaps making a few adjustments to the plan, and then bringing it to our Board of Directors at the end of September for adoption. Something that, if you're a newcomer to our Affordable Housing Plan, something that you may not be aware of is that our plan year runs from October 1st through September 30th of each year. So the proposals that John will be presenting today will be for activity that will commence October 1st of 2015, going through September 30th of 2016. This year, we have a special set of communications for you in that our Board of Directors has adopted a new strategic plan. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to see our new strategic plan, you can access that on our website, which is mnhousing.gov. The name of our new strategic plan is Housing is the Foundation for Success. And in writing that new strategic plan, we have developed a new vision for Minnesota housing, and you see that in front of you now. That is, all Minnesotans live in a safe, stable home they can afford in a community of their choice. This has a little bit different flavor than our previous vision, really focusing on the importance of community, which we have always done, and really emphasizing the importance of stable housing as a foundation for success. Our mission is also revised a bit, really reflecting this foundation theme. Housing is a foundation for success, so we collaborate with individuals, communities, and partners to create, preserve, and finance affordable housing. Those last three themes, create, preserve, and finance, are not new. Neither is collaboration with our individuals, communities, and partners, but it does bring it into the frame of housing being a foundation for success. So what is the purpose of this thing called an affordable housing plan? It serves every year as the agency's business plan. This is where we publicly talk about how we expect that our resources will be deployed in the coming year, and also talks about some key policy initiatives. As I mentioned earlier, it launches our new strategic plan. For those who like to get into a little bit more detail, it does specify program by program funding, and it also sets goals for the number of units and number of households that will be assisted. Again, the strategic plan is about housing being a foundation for success. As we've done more and more work through the work of the Interagency Council on Homelessness, as well as the Olmsted Subcabinet in particular, it really brings it home just how important it is for people to be able to succeed in their education, having a healthy lifestyle, and having economic stability, to have a safe, stable, and affordable place to live makes all those other things so much easier. Our strategic plan also talks about our focused effort for those in our society that have the greatest needs. It also talks about the cornerstone of the Foundation for Success, which is providing a wide range of financing tools, serving households across a housing continuum and engaging local communities, because none of what we propose here is possible if communities around the state of Minnesota are not helping us in identifying where the needs are in those communities. I want to talk just a little bit about the current environment in which we are writing this plan. We're really blessed in Minnesota to be ahead of the curve nationally in having a strong economy. Our unemployment rate is now down to 3.9%. It's been a very good year for us in our 2015 affordable housing plan with record home lending. That's been made possible by the continuing policy of the Federal Reserve in keeping long-term interest rates low. And we are currently projecting the largest number of single-family mortgages ever by Minnesota Housing in a single year at 4,600 mortgages. That's more than double just a couple of years ago when we were coming out of the Great Recession. Home prices are up modestly in Minnesota, 7% last year. So the number of households that are underwater with their equity continues to shrink with each year. That also means that there's creeping up on less affordability for housing, but in Minnesota it's been far more modest than in a lot of other healthy environments. Rental vacancies are below 3%, and I know John will talk more about this, but that really does place a burden on affordability, particularly for our rental households. We do continue to be faced in Minnesota with nearly 600,000 cost-burdened households. That's households that pay more than 30% of their income for their housing. That's a 68% increase in the number of households that are cost-burdened compared to the year 2000. To underscore why that's happening, over that same time period, so between 2000 and 2015, when you adjust for inflation, incomes in Minnesota are actually down by a little over 7%, and housing costs are up by nearly 5%. So you can see that we have a growing gap in that affordability that I honestly think is one of the biggest challenges that we as a state will face in the coming years, where more and more households will find themselves caught in this affordability gap. To give you a few examples of some of our major needs, this certainly isn't everything, but a few of the things we're paying particular attention to. When the last homeless census was done in January of 2015, there were still 7,500 Minnesotans experiencing homelessness. We often hear from people working among the homeless that this is probably an undercount because the HUD guidelines call for this census to be done in January, where we know in Minnesota that's kind of our lowest level of people actually being homeless. A lot of people double up during the winter in unstable situations, and probably that number is higher in other times of the year. There are over 270,000 children in lower income households. This is at the lowest end of the income range that are cost burdened by their housing. So we particularly are focused in our planning of focusing on housing for families with children. There are 86,000 senior households that are extremely low income, 53% of which are homeowners. And you'll see a new emphasis in this year's plan on looking at solutions for those low-income seniors. And we continue to be the third highest state in the level of disparity in homeownership between white households and households of color or Hispanic ethnicity. It's more than a 30% gap between the homeownership rate for white households, and those who are non-white. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John to walk you through the details of our plan.
Hi, this is John Patterson. I'm going to talk about two pieces. One is our program and budget overview, which I'm going to do first, and then I'm going to go on to some key program and policy initiatives. On your screen now is a table with a lot of numbers on it. It shows an aggregate, what we're proposing this year compared to what we were doing last year. We actually fund about 42 different programs, and this basically consolidates them into 8 program areas with some aggregate numbers, which helps digest the large amount of activity that we do. And I have up here the original 2015 Affordable Housing Plan, our revised plan, which we increased substantially with our mortgage lending, and then our proposed 2016. I kind of want to walk through these changes. So if you look at the bottom line where that red star is, you can see last year we originally proposed a $950 million budget. We increased it about $2.2 billion during the year with very active mortgage lending. And this year we are going to be kind of between the two at about $960 million, a little above what we were originally planned for last year. And I want to walk through some of the key changes. If you go to the top line where the blue star is, you can see that last year we went from 450 to 733 million on mortgage lending. This was just because our active market. And next year we're going to go about between the two. So there was a sort of a big increase and then sort of going between the two for this current year. The other big change is where the green dots are, or stars are. And this is where program funding we did through the housing infrastructure bonds and the general obligation bonds. A year ago, we received about $100 million in bonding proceeds. This year, we received about $10 million, but we do have some unused funds from last year, about another 10 for about $20 million. So overall, split between those two lines, there's about $79 million less in activity. A lot of the other changes are pretty small of adjustments we made during the year. We might have gotten increased or higher repayments than we expected and accordingly adjusted some of the funding levels for programs, and we did some shifting. We shifted some money this year to our down payment assistance program to support the high level of mortgage activity. So there's a lot to digest. I think the bottom line is that we are about $8 million higher than we originally planned last year. We're about $275 million less than we actually ended up doing. To help you sort of digest this, I have that table simplified. And this basically shows what happened with last year's budget originally proposed to this year. So on home mortgage loans, from our original, we're about $110 million higher. As I mentioned, because of the GO and HIB bond proceeds, we're about $80 million, $79 million less than our original plan last year. And in the other categories, we're about $23 million less. To sort of break up that other category, this is primarily in our low and moderate income rental program, which is first mortgages for our multifamily lending. Without the housing infrastructure bonds, our overall level of activity in multifamily protections is a little bit lower, which will decrease our first mortgage activity. We have some less funding at home and a little bit less money in our targeted mortgage opportunity program. And I'll talk about those two programs a little bit later. But bottom line, we're about $8 million above our original proposal last year and about $275 million higher than our revised version. Again, on our revised version, we're about $165 million less than the revised amount. Again, about $80 million less than HIB and $27 million less than the others. So this helps sort of break out that distinction. If you look at our budget overall, there's a couple key things to look at. A lot of our activities around first mortgages, both single family and multifamily. That's well over half of our budget. There's also about $181 million of our Section 8 contracts, which we're basically administering funds for HUD. What's left is what we call our gap affordability funding. This is our deferred loans and our grants, and this is really what makes housing affordable. And I'd like to sort of talk about the changes here. In the last line, there is about an $82 million drop in this gap financing, going about $215 million to $133 million. To explain why, if you look at the first line, this is showing about a $4.8 million reduction in federal funding. This is a little bit of an artificial decline. One issue is that for home funding, It's been unstable and uncertain, so we're actually not going to budget home funds until we actually receive it. So last year we had to estimate about $7 million of home funding, both new funding and some carryover from previous years. This year we're only originally budgeting about $400,000, which is our current carry forward. But when those 2016 home funds do become available, we will be adding it to our planning process. So hopefully the home funds will come back up after we receive the 2016 appropriation. As far as state appropriations, there's about $7.6 million more. A key piece of this is about $2.5 million more for our Bridges program over the biennium to increase the amount of funding available for rent assistance for people with a serious mental illness. Again, you can see the decline in the housing infrastructure and GEO-bond proceeds. And then last, our Pool 3. This is our affordability fund, the stuff that we use our own agency resources for deferred loans and grants. And you can see there's about a $5.6 million decline. This came about because we are operating in a low interest rate environment, and we're a financial institution. In a low interest rate environment like your own bank account, you learn less interest on your assets. So we have a little lower earnings and have accordingly had to reduce our funding level from Pool 3 a little bit. Looking at households assisted, taking those dollars and turning this into people and households, you can see that we're going to be extremely close, about 65,000 households that we are estimating. Again, broken up by program categories. I want to talk about some of the key ones. We have the home buyer owner education and counseling. That's one of the big categories. A lot of this is just that home buyer counseling through our HECAP program. That's about 13,000 households. The big one on there is the rent assistance contracts administration. That's our Section 8 project based and traditional based Section 8 project-based rent assistance contract administration. And the last is the preventing and ending homelessness. And of that, almost 12,000 households, about 7,500 of those are for our family homeless prevention assistance program. So that's what rounds out the biggest programs. We have a lot of other activity in our home mortgages and our rental production. And I want to talk about some of the key initiatives that we're going to be going through during this affordable housing plan. And this is really geared around our strategic plan, which Mary sort of highlighted with our new mission and vision. Our key work in this area around our core work is to promote and support successful homeownership, finance new affordable rental housing opportunities, preserve the existing housing stock, provide housing resources to support community and economic development, lead, collaborate, and take action on critical housing issues, and strengthen the financial and organizational capacity of the agency. In those areas, there's two of them we're going to have to focus on this year. One is that we want to continue our funding of high levels of home mortgage activity. I don't know if we'll be able to maintain what we did this current year, but we want to come close. Even if we don't meet this year's record levels, we're pretty confident that this coming year's 2016 activity will be higher than any other year we had in the last decade besides this current year. We're going to do this by providing access in the capital markets and providing funding for mortgages and providing down payment assistance. Another critical issue is address needs from a tight rental market. 3% vacancy rate. It's very tough for people to find affordable rental housing. During this upcoming selections, we're guessing that there'll be a significant amount of new construction to meet that need. And in particular, we're also going to make $2 million from the Governor's Housing Jobs Initiative to increase workforce housing. Will be a key initiative around that. We also want to improve our organizational capacity. We'll implement a new single-family loan origination software, make it easy for us and our lending partners to originate loans, which will support our high level of mortgage activity. We'll also continue to implement what we call our multifamily remodel project. This really looks at our process from a development conception all the way up through lease up, looking at our processes to streamline and make that as efficient and effective as possible, which should reduce the amount of time it takes for projects to actually become occupied, which will help address the tight rental market. Lastly, we will build agency-wide capacity for managing data, documents, and records, really just improving the efficiency of our own operations. Our plan also has 5 strategic priorities. It's to reduce Minnesota's racial, ethnicity, homeownership disparity, prevent and end homelessness, preserve housing with federal project-based rent assistance, finance housing that is responsive to Minnesota's changing demographics, and finally address specific and critical needs in local housing markets. And we will go through each of these in turn. Looking at the reducing the home ownership disparity, we're going to be providing about $516 million in mortgage lending. This is $510 million from our traditional home mortgage loans, $4 million for targeted mortgage opportunity program. This program is really geared to people who have had difficult time accessing traditional mortgage lending in the current environment, and it's providing more of a tailored mortgage product for them, really emphasizing households of color. In the first year, this is a pilot program. The first year we provided about $8 million in mortgage funds. Last year we provided about $10 million. And of that amount, we still have about $4 million left, which we're going to finish out this year. And as this happens, as we sort of use those last funds, we're going to be evaluating the program and really looking at next steps of how we want to go forward with this activity. We next have $2 million for the Habitat for Humanity initiative. This is really providing funding for a secondary market for Habitat's mortgages. Overall, from all our activity, we want 27% of our first-time homebuyers to be households of color or Hispanic ethnicity. We estimate that about a little over 25% of renter households are income eligible for our programs or households of color. So by getting above 25%, we're showing no disparity in our own lending. We want to make about $22.3 million in down payment assistance. This is critical because for our deferred payment loans, this is down payment assistance in a deferred loan, we have about 34% of the borrowers are households of color. For people who don't receive down payment assistance, about 15%. So really providing that down payment assistance is critical for reaching this population. We're emphasize home buyer capacity and coaching. We have about $1.5 million in our traditional home buyer education, training, and counseling program. We're also including, like we did last year, $650,000 for enhanced capacity. This is a more targeted coaching, intensive coaching for people who had trouble accessing the market. Again, an emphasis on households of color. Currently, about 92% of the people who've been in this program are from households of color. We want to engage in a broader market industry also. Minnesota housing only accounts for 3 to 6% of mortgage lending. And so if we really want to turn the curve on disparity, we have to engage the overall market also. Next, going on to preventing and ending homelessness. We're going to allocate about $42 million of funds that's really on homelessness. That's about $31 million in rent assistance, operating support, and funds for the Family Homeless Prevention Assistance Program, and about $11 million in capital funding through the Housing Trust Fund using our Housing Infrastructure Bond proceeds. We're going to launch the next two-year plan to prevent and end homelessness. We completed the first plan this current year, and we're going to build off of that success. We want to implement or assist implementing the coordinated entry. This is a federal requirement on our continuums of care to have really one coordinated source for information, assessment, and referrals for those people needing assistance who are facing homelessness. And we're also going to better coordinate housing and service funding with DHS. An example of this would be coordinated grant making and evaluation. Our next priority is preserve federal project-based rent assistance, including about 25 or even more million dollars for preservation. Some dollars are directly targeted preservation, but also beyond that 25 million, a lot of our funding, such as our low and moderate income rental or our tax credit program, can be used for both new construction and preservation, so it's well beyond that 25 million. As part of that, we want to create a year-round process for preservation, not rely just on our annual request for proposals. This will allow preservation deals to get funds in a more timely fashion. Of particular emphasis this year is going to be the USDA RD Section 8 units with rent assistance and maturing mortgages. I think between now and 2019, there's a large chunk of those that will be maturing, and that rent assistance will be at risk. So we want to make sure we preserve those units. We want to respond to the changing demographics of the state. As Mary mentioned, with a rising senior population, and even among the extremely low-income senior households, a lot of them are homeowners, people who were able to buy a home but now living largely on Social Security. We want to make sure we have rehabilitation dollars for them. We also want to figure out and look at a pilot for senior rental housing with modest service options for those low-income seniors who need to have a new rental option but are unable to afford the market rate options. We want to incent developers to build larger units for large families, in particular immigrant families. This will be looking at our selection process and making sure that we are giving adequate incentives to developers to build these large units. We also want to support housing choice for people with disabilities and more specifically implement our Olmsted plan through the Olmsted subcabinet. Our last priority is address specific and critical needs and address specific and critical local housing needs. We want to build capacity of local organizations. We do this through funding dollars, providing technical assistance. That can be through our underwriting staff, helping people put applications together, or even it can be through our compliance staff who might work with local property owners and managers to make sure that their properties are well managed. We will work with local communities to assess needs and identify strategies and solutions. This includes providing our community profile, which is our online tool for accessing community data and maps, including we'll have on top of that our community dialogues. Every year we do 6 or 7 dialogues around the state, meeting local communities, talk about their housing needs and coming to shared understandings. And also really encouraging communities to do their own local housing plans. We will review our programs to make sure they're simple, flexible, accessible, and timely. An example of this would be this last year we evaluated our rental rehab deferred loan program. And from that evaluation, we really tried to simplify the program to make it more accessible and really emphasis on rural rental properties with 1 to 4 units to make sure they have access to rehabilitation dollars. And we'll do similar types of analyses going forward for other programs. With this, we'll be doing overall about $46 million of funding that really is geared toward these local needs and some emerging trends, economic development, workforce housing, and dealing with the aging housing stock. So that sort of comes to the conclusion of our formal presentation. I do want to show some of the logistics going forward. As Mary mentioned, our comment period is still open. It will be through the 28th. The email address is on here where you'll submit your comments. But also if you go to our webpage, www.mnhousing.gov, right on the main page there on the left side, there's special announcements. There's a link with all this information. You can download the plan if you haven't already and information about submitting comments.
Please feel free to give us your thoughts. They can be affirming of things that are in the plan or question whether we should look at things a little differently, and encourage both kinds of comments. So thank you for your attendance today, and we look forward to working with you through the coming year. Thanks very much.